Welcome to the week ahead. This is for the week of June 20th. There's a lot in store for us for this week. But first, we have to commemorate the loss of Malaysia's #1 singer and entertainer, Arwah Adibah Noor. She is, I might not know her personally, but we have interacted on social media. And we have been, in a way, social media friends for over 5 years. So there's a lot of thoughts and prayers that goes into her as well. It's also quite timely for us to understand that her loss is due to cervical cancer, and perhaps we can do more in trying to learn a little bit better about how cervical cancer is contracted and perhaps how we can move ahead and protect ourselves and our loved ones against cervical cancer. So more research can be done there. We now move on to the local news first, because there's a lot in store for us when it comes to the next 7 days. We can start off with the anti-hopping law, because the anti-party hopping bill currently is in its final stages of preparation. The Prime Minister, Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob, confirms that it will be tabled in July's parliamentary sitting, but it's important for us to try to understand a little bit better about the implications of it. A few months ago, on agenda AWANI as well as on Dialog 3 Penjuru, I requested to be asked for clarity from 3 parliamentarians, the MP Anthony Lok, as well as Fahim Fadzil, as well as Azalina Aziz, talking about the intricacies of it. And there's a lot of things that needs to be mentioned. One of them is that it's not a lot that people are disagreeing upon. So there is a minority few that do not want the anti-hopping. When I say minority few, the minority few of the parliamentarians, meaning that of the 222, there is a few that is opposing this with tooth and nail. So I don't know what we can do to actually overcome that, but for now, it's important for us to try to understand that a little bit better. Anyway, this is, of course, the Parliamentary Select Committee and, of course, the Prime Minister talking about it. Let's take a look into this clip first.
Tindakan melompat parti, terutamanya pasca pilihan raya umum ke-14, telah merencatkan proses demokrasi berperlembagaan di Malaysia. Sehubungan dengan itu, rang undang-undang ini adalah mustahak untuk menjamin kestabilan dan integriti politik selepas PRU ke-15.
Previously, the Parliamentary Special Select Committee proposed that the bill be tabled at a one-day sitting in early July. However, the Prime Minister decided there was no need to hold the special sitting. Among the reasons listed was the cost of holding a special sitting, which amounts to more than 1 million ringgit, excluding operational costs. The next parliamentary meeting is scheduled to begin on July 18th.
So on top of this, there's a lot of rumors in terms of the movement of parliamentarians within certain political parties. One of them is, of course, Senior Minister Datuk Seri Azmin Ali, following which he has reiterated that he is committed to spend his political career, at least currently, with Bersatu. This is after rumors have surfaced that he may follow former colleague Datuk Zuraida Kamaruddin in quitting the party. But it's also important for us to understand that things are still fluid amongst Bersatu parliamentarians. So over the next 7 days, we're going to see a lot of these movements coming in. Anyway, this is a clip that we can play for you regarding this topic.
In a statement, the Bersatu Supreme Council members said the ideas and principles of the party are in line with his own. After Zuraida resigned from Bersatu for Parti Bangsa Malaysia PBM, talks about factions within the party erupted. It came to a point when the party president Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin had to deny the rumors that Azmin and Datuk Rashid Hasnun are planning to leave the party in the wake of Zuraida's departure.
The youth and women's wing of Parti Pesaka Bumi Putra Bersatu is said to have to prepare to attract young voters below the age of 30. Deputy President Dato' Ahmad Douglas Unggah said that the group makes up 2/3 of the over 675,000 new voters in Sarawak. So focus is as well on there. This is Dato' Ahmad Douglas Unggah talking about the topic.
He said both wings should come up with programs suited to the interests of young voters and clearly explain the state government's development policies to their members. PBB Secretary General Datuk Sri Alexander Nantalingi clarified that the new youth section would not be a formal wing but would be part of the existing youth wing. The party would come up with programs to absorb this cohort of youths into politics and nurture them to be future leaders.
So that's it. That's all there is when it comes to politics for this week. There's also the court cases that is going to take place regarding 1MDB and the issues surrounding it. So do keep an eye out for that if you are keeping an eye out on the 1MDB cases regarding politics. Perhaps now is a good time to talk about the judiciary as well, because hundreds of lawyers protested in the Walk for Judicial Independence very recently, demanding the government to uphold the independence of the judicial system. Malaysian Bar President Karen Chia says that this is crucial to instill the confidence or preserve the public confidence towards the judiciary.
Members of the Bar, on the 27th of May this year, the Malaysian Bar had an extraordinary general meeting. At the general meeting, we had resolved to condemn the actions and the unprecedented manner in which MACC had publicly announced commencement of investigations against a sitting judge and publicly announcing the name of the judge. We, the Malaysian Bar, view this as an intimidation of the judiciary. Do you agree? Do you agree? Any investigations that's going to be carried out on sitting judges must be carried out in a manner which does not erode independence of the judiciary.
Participants of the Padang Merbok Walk also submitted a memorandum to the government. Deputy Minister in the Prime Minister's Department in charge of Parliament and Law, Datuk Mas Irmiati, said she would hand over the memorandum to the Prime Minister and the Law Minister.
Jadi terima kasih di atas segala kerjasama dan saya mohon maaf di atas segala kesulitan dan kepayahan yang berlaku pada hari ini, dan saya akan serahkan kepada Yang Berhormat Menteri Datuk Seri Dato' Wan Junaidi dan juga Yang Berhormat Perdana Menteri memorandum yang saya terima pada hari ini. Semoga keadilan, kehakiman di negara kita akan terus ditegakkan.
So over the next 7 days, there's still a lot that needs to be talked about when it comes to the judiciary, restoring and preserving the public confidence towards the system and institution, and many more. So perhaps maybe we can play this clip of our interview on AWANI tonight, my colleagues over there, when they interviewed the Judicial Independence Bar Council member, New Sin Yu. Take a look.
Any investigation done against a Superior Court judge must go through the procedure that is prescribed by the law. And it must not done in a way where the publicity itself would end up damaging the judiciary. Because as we know it, any publicity against Superior Court judges could end up eroding confidence in the judiciary, especially in a case like this, where the subject matter is so public, the individual is so public. It also asks a number of other things, including that Parliament, as well as the Executive, take steps to ensure that the judiciary is not interfered with.
How can a public announcement to investigate a sitting judge erode public confidence?
What had happened here is that you have MACC, an organ of the Executive, and as we all know it, the Executive is the only branch of government that has the power to take coercive actions. And what I mean by that is that they have the power of, like we saw today, deploying the police. They have the power of ordering MACC to investigate against judges. They have the power of arresting anyone which they suspect have committed a crime, whether or not that is indeed the case. So it's a very powerful organ. It's a very powerful branch of government. And if you have the judiciary being intimidated the way which they are currently being intimidated, then public confidence in the judiciary will be undermined, because those who come before the court, they will be wondering whether or not the judges are actually impartial when it comes to, especially in cases against the government, because could these judges end up ruling in favor of the government because they're afraid of any repercussion that may happen.
Okay, so there's a lot that needs to be discussed when it comes to the judicial independence over the next 7 days, so keep an eye out for that. Just now we covered politics and then a little bit on judiciary. After this, we're going to be covering the economics aspect over the next 7 days. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. It's around 10:40 p.m. on the evening of 19th June. This show talks about the next 7 days, what's going to happen in the country, and perhaps one big idea right now is, of course, the economics as well as in the business community world. We start off with some of the shortcomings that is impacted in the academic sector. University of Wollongong Vice Chancellor and President, Professor Patricia Davidson, said that it is time for universities and other educational institutions to actually invest and make use of the full breadth and width of technology post-COVID. This is our interview with her.
Universities throughout the world, we've been saved by technology and also the adaptability of our staff and students. So one of the really interesting things about our global campuses at UOW is the pandemic has actually brought us closer. Because I can remember just not that long ago, you know, to be able to organise a teleconference, you had to go and get special permission because it would cost a lot of money. Now anybody anyone can set up a Zoom meeting. So we've had many more collaborations across our campuses. We're all at an inflection point in history. You know, hopefully we're all coming through this terrible time of loss and suffering. And I think it's time to now think, okay, what worked well, what didn't work well, and what do we build on to future-proof not just the education sector, but society. And I think technology is going to be part of that.
So that's the area that we can touch upon when it comes to the academic sector. You can watch the full interview on Astro AWANI. Just look for Wollongong University Professor and you can see the full interview there. Now we move on to our partner over at BIZTECH Asia. Brian Fernandez, my colleague, interviews the founder of Smart Investor, David Kuo, on the issue revolving the Fed hike and how this is going to impact the Malaysian central banks moving forward. Take a look.
Well, and the thing is, so this is essentially what's going to be if next month predictions are proved correct and there'll be another 75 basis point increase. We're going to essentially have an increase of 1.5% in interest rates just over a 2-month period. How is that going to look like across the Asia Pacific region as governments focus on trying to control food inflation in particular, but overall inflation as a whole?
Well, I think the point is, even if they do increase by another 0.75% in July, it's still not going to be enough, Brian. They still have to do an awful lot more. And that really was the subtext behind what Jay Powell was trying to tell the markets, that they will be very aggressive towards increasing interest rates. So I think, you know, companies need to be very aware that interest rates are going to be on the rise, and in particular, companies that have huge amounts of debt or require funding need to be very careful. You know, as a side note, Brian, I just saw on the news wires this morning that Revlon, the cosmetic brand, has filed for Chapter 11. And it just goes to show that no company is immune. Wow. If you carry debt, and in the case of Revlon, it's about $3 billion worth of debt, you're going to hurt. And in the case of Revlon, they also suffered from changing consumer tastes, being usurped in some ways by some of the smaller players in the cosmetic industry, and they were also hurt by the supply chain disruption. So there's going to be a lot of turmoil in the market, Brian, and anybody that is investing in companies need to, number one, look at their balance sheet very, very closely and just see how much debt they have on there, whether that debt is going to be able to be serviced by the company. And then secondly, have a look at their top line revenues, if it's being eaten away or eroded by competitors, and do they have that ability to raise prices? And I think in the case of Revlon, it was everything happening at the same time. They don't have the ability to raise prices. They have huge amounts of debt. Then they also have, the supply chain disruption. So I think it really is a lesson for all investors.
And David, it just brings to the fore the fact that we're just in the early stages of rate hikes. We're going to see a lot of companies going under just because they're not able to service their debts. But I want to ask you about how we should react also beyond looking at just the debt issue. And that's now something that I'm going to look at on a couple of companies. But let's talk about the Warren Buffett school of thought and what you talked about in an article that you just published on the Smart Investor, which you can check out on the Smart Investor website. You alluded to the fact Warren Buffett says he doesn't care really about what's happening, but really to just look at the companies itself. Could you tell us a little bit more about his philosophy?
Okay, it's not just Warren Buffett, but there's another great investor called Peter Lynch. And both of them are of the same mind, which is that we are at some point in time going to have recession. I mean, that is the way the economy works. And any central banker, any government leader that says, we've solved the problem of recession, there is going to be no boom and bust, they are completely wrong. We are going to get moments when the economy grows very quickly. Then we're going to get those moments when the economy starts to decline, and then we have a recession. Now, in the case of the Federal Reserve, we know it's going to engineer some kind of recession because that is the only way that they're going to be able to break the back of the inflation cycle that we are in. And so as far as Warren Buffett is concerned, he looks at businesses. He says, how is this business going to perform? How is this business going to be able to generate revenue? And that really is the secret of investing, not only in the case of Warren Buffett, but also in the case of Peter Lynch. And Peter Lynch once said, that anybody who doesn't think there is going to be a recession is not ready for investing. When you are investing, you have to be ready for it.
Okay, so you can watch the full interview and interviews like that on our sister show called AWANI. It airs every Monday to Fridays at 9 a.m. Sometimes I'm on that show, sometimes I'm not. But my colleagues, Acha, Najib, as well as Nina, is anchoring that show. It's really a good show for you to invest and spend your time learning about the markets, about the business, as well as the SME world. That's happening Monday to Fridays at 9 a.m. Now, meanwhile, we move on to Kenanga, giving a thought or two regarding the OPR possibility. This is because Kenanga Investment Bank views that Bank Negara is likely to raise the OPR, or overnight policy rate, by at least 25 basis points by year end. This is following the Fed's aggressive move. Let's take a look into that conversation.
In its economic report today, Kenanga said the global financial market's reaction to the rate hike and its eventual impact on the economy would provide a stronger impetus for most central banks to follow suit. However, this does not imply that BNM would follow the Fed's monetary decision in lockstep manner, said Kenanga. The investment bank said BNM's policy stance is gradually tilting towards tightening in view of improving domestic demand following the reopening of international borders and relaxation of COVID-19 restrictions, leading to the build-up of a demand-driven inflationary trend.
So from the Kenanga Investment Bank view, we move now to some of the members in the executive. This is because Malaysia must strive to ensure that the economic growth and equitable recovery is being shared by all Malaysians. Minister in the Prime Minister's Department in charge of the economy, Datuk Seri MUSTAPA Muhammad, said that households in Sabah and Sarawak particularly, as well as in the northern and eastern regions of Peninsular Malaysia, were found to experience slower progress in regaining employment and regaining income compared to those in other regions, namely KL, Penang, JB, basically West Coast, right? So this is the area where we need to look into on what Tokpa says on how to rejuvenate the entire country.
In 2020, the GDP per capita gap between the central region of the country, namely the Klang Valley, Negeri Sembilan and Melaka, as compared to Sabah and Sarawak, were 2.7% and 1.3% respectively. In the 12th Malaysia Plan, we have made it our aim to reduce the gap to 2.5% for Sabah. This is a modest goal, which I believe we can achieve. Even worse, the highest increases in poverty were recorded in these states that have been left behind, namely Sabah, Kelantan, Sarawak and Kedah. We have been trying our best to mitigate this. Indeed, the issue of poverty eradication remains high, if not one of the main priorities on the government's agenda.
He said this in a recorded speech at the launch of the Malaysia Economic Monitor June 2022 report by the World Bank. MUSTAPA added that the EPU and the Implementation Coordination Unit was spearheading an effort to eradicate hardcore poverty in Malaysian families. According to him, the program hinges on local solutions tailored to the strengths of particular communities. The first phase covers 80 localities and prioritizes the states which have the highest poverty rates.
Okay, so back from the conversation from the executive, we now move on to an economist, in particular Julia Goh of UOB. So we've seen how we've covered the Fed hike, how it might be seen as Bank Negara trying to improve on or raising the rate by at least 25 bips, and seeing how Tokpa, speaking on behalf of the government and therefore the executive, are talking about how they want to improve the equitable share ownership of the wealth of the country globally, holistically. Now we move back to how the Fed rate hike is going to be used often as a yardstick for central bank to frame policy. This is very important because given the lagging pace of the economic recovery from COVID-19, how will Bank Negara move forward regarding the Fed's hawkish stance? Remember, it's 75 bips and then another 75 bips, and 150 bips in total in so many weeks. So this is when we really need to look into what people like Julia Goh, economists from UOB Malaysia, talks about. Do take a look.
So we think that there is a possibility for more hikes in the third quarter. I think the reality is inflation pressures are rising everywhere, not just in Malaysia, right? This is a result of the Ukraine crisis that's affected prices of food and energy, the China lockdown measures that's affected supply chains, and higher demand due to economic reopening. So for Malaysia, our inflation print may look modest, but when we break it down, we do see food inflation rising to 5-year highs, Malaysia's core inflation rising to highest level in 4 years. And so the reality is that as the economy is recovering, price of inputs are going up. The price pressures are also rising due to the global events. And in the future, it could become more sticky or permanent. So at this point, Malaysians are partly shielded because we have subsidies, or else inflation pressures could be even higher. And so for Bank Negara, we think that given these developments, we think the risk is if you don't act fast enough, it could lead to more problems later on.
Julia says as the economy continues to recover, Bank Negara should follow through with at least 1 to 2 more rate hikes to keep a lid on inflation.
The rate adjustments is to move in line with the economic recovery. So I guess for Malaysians, as interest rates go up, they will see adjustments to their interest, their loan repayments. That is to be expected. And of course, I'm sure Bank Negara is also mindful that there are already pressures in terms of cost of living and so forth. And so I would think that that's why they would not want to make it too aggressive as well, the rate hikes, because it could put it would put a lot of burden on the consumers, right? So I guess it's just to find a middle approach that is measured and not too aggressive.
So the next 7 days, keep a close eye on the economic development of the country. Some data regarding inflation is going to be announced, not just only Malaysia, but of course our neighbors as well, the Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand. Also do keep an eye out on some announcements from the government regarding the stimulus package that might be introduced. GST is still on the table. That might be better in terms over the next few weeks, not just this week, next 7 days, regarding the implementation of it. So a lot that needs to be kept in view when it comes to the next 7 days regarding the business world, economic world, as well as the SME world. We'll take one short break. When we come back, we'll discuss about the travel possibilities of us leaving this country. We'll be right back after these messages. So I won't be in Malaysia this week. I'm going to be doing some work over in Singapore. After that, I'm going to be doing some work in Jakarta. So as you can see, the travel bug has hit me and I'm going to be traveling back as usual pre-pandemic days. Now, I'm not unique. There's a lot of us that is traveling, if not internationally, domestically as well. This, of course, has given rise to the worries of the pandemic hitting back at us. But as long as we treat it as an endemic, meaning that it survives amongst the community, but as long as all of us are protected via vaccines, everything should be just fine. A personal note, my son, 10-year-old son, has just recovered from COVID positive. He suffered quite bad for the first 1 or 2 days, and then of course he was on the path to recovery. He is part of that Pick Kids program where he got the full vaccination earlier this part of the year, and of course my 2 other daughters, they are not COVID positive, at least not just yet. So this is the thing that we have to survive and live on. Now, having said that, if you do intend to travel, in particular, we keep an eye out on Thailand, because from July 1 or 1st of July, travelers entering Thailand will no longer be required to apply for a visitor pass or purchase travel insurance to enter the country. Thailand is expected to lift most of its COVID restriction following the full-scale resumption of business and economic activities. Take a look.
However, travelers will still need to show proof of COVID-19 vaccination or a negative COVID-19 test result. Such proof will be inspected by airline staff before departure. Meanwhile, the government also said the use of face masks outdoors would be made voluntary. For indoor environments, masks will continue to be required. Officials are expected to conclude details to allow a nationwide green zone from July 1st, where all businesses and other activities could resume.
So there's a lot in store for you over the next 7 days. As you can see, I try to make it compact and make it digestible for you to utilize the kind of information that could be useful for you this week. If you have any suggestions, just let me know. Hit me up at Ibrahim Saninet on Instagram, also on Twitter. Until then, thanks very much for watching. Have a good week ahead.